Thank you. Welcome to the HART regular Board of Directors meeting. I'd like to go ahead and ask everyone to please stand to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, before we go on to the approval of the minutes, I'd like to ask our attorney, Mr. David Smith, to discuss the appointment of our newest board member, Mr. Les Miller, Commissioner Les Miller.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and directors. A question was raised regarding the process for the appointment. And the statute addresses this at 163-567-9, and it talks about an appointment will be made to fill a vacancy within a period of time after the occurrence of a vacancy. It does not define occurrence of a vacancy. If the appointment is not made within 20 days by the appointing body, be that the county, the city, or the governor, the board has 10 days to make an appointment. If the board does not act within 10 days, the governor has 10 days to make an appointment. If all of those time periods lapse, Section 9 is silent, but if you look at Section 10, it talks about the fact that if there is a vacancy on the board that's not filled in a manner consistent with the timeframes in Section 9, the board will fill that vacancy. That having been said, there's a question as to when the vacancy occurs. A resignation letter, statute does not say resignation. It says occurrence of a vacancy. Resignation letter was circulated, I believe, June 16th. The vacancy could have occurred at the first meeting at which that person was to sit, which was, I think, July 21st. So there's an ambiguity with regard to how you interpret that provision in the statute. There's further problems caused by the fact that we have not handled it in any manner that would reflect the statutory requirements. So all of that having been said, there's more we can talk about, but I don't think it's necessary to. I think I would agree with the recommendation I believe Director Jarosh made to me by email, which I was trying to pull up to confirm that, but it would be my recommendation in any event, which is just to avoid the ambiguity, it would be appropriate for this board to ratify the appointment of Mr. Miller so no one can question his bona fides to act on the board.
Okay. Are there any questions from the board members about this particular situation? That opposing?
So moved.
That's a motion. Second. All in favor of that, please say aye. Aye. Thank you, Mr. Smith, and I appreciate it. And I would, at some later date, maybe have someone entertain a motion to ask Mr. Smith to have codified what our procedure is going to be, since we haven't followed any procedure from before. So thank you, Mr. Smith, for that information, and thank you for letting us clean that up. I need a motion to approve the minutes from the last regular meeting on July 21st. Okay, before we go forward, I'd like to welcome our newest member, Commissioner Les Miller. I don't think that I need to say anything about you other than the fact that, you know, you've been involved in public service for so many years, and the most important thing in my mind, not only being a county commissioner, a state rep, a state senator, a city council member, but also being the student body president of USF, that to me is about as winning of a background as you're ever going to get. So Commissioner Miller, welcome to our board. Thank you very much for being here, and I think this may be the first time that we have ever had the spouse of a previous board member also serve on this board. So thank you for being here, and thank you for agreeing to serve on this board. Thank you. Okay, let's go on with the regular agenda. We have a recognition coming up. I guess it is for the Compto Best Grassroots Activities Award, and who is
Yes, sir. I'll ask Mr. Al Burns. I believe I saw Al walk in earlier this morning. Mr. Burns, will you come to the podium, please, sir? So this is an award that our Compto chapter, which HART sponsors our Compto membership, and we have a lot of members from our staff area active. It's an award that we are very proud of. Our own Carla Williams in Community Relations is the president for the chapter here in Florida. And Al, you are active in the chapter as well, so will you tell us a little bit about this award?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair. I'm Al Burns, Senior Manager of Procurement and Contracts Administration. COMTO stands for the Conference of Minority Transportation Officials. It's a program or organization that's very active in supporting disadvantaged businesses, or as they would like to say, underutilized businesses. Ms. Carla Williams, she is the chapter president, as the CEO stated. She has taken an active role in promoting promoting our chapter. It consists of members from the airport, the Port Authority, the Expressway, all in Hillsborough County and Central Florida. At the national convention, it was a very sad moment. The chairman of the board there has recently passed away, and it was more of a bereaving time of bereavement type of ceremony. But I was pleased I had left a day early to come back for budget meetings, but Ms. Williams sent me a text message and let us know that out of 39 chapters, we had won the award for the best grassroots chapter. Things that we have done a tremendous amount of fundraising. The airport has an intern, HART has an intern. We sponsor various expos for vendors, learning how to do business with different agencies here in the Tampa Bay area. And I'm just very fortunate to be part of the board of directors for that. So thank you for Ms. Egan for acknowledging this, and thank you for board for supporting it.
Okay. Congratulations, Al. Hang on now, don't go away. We're going to give you an award.
Is Carla here?
As we get the camera. So is this small? Is this small to be in the luggage coming back from a conference?
It's crystal. So
it's crystal. Okay, well, then you get to hold it. So we will do a photo op very quickly. Let's turn. Thank you.
thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience. All right, next on our agenda is the public input on agenda items. I have a list of folks that have already signed up to speak before us. Before we begin, though, are there any other members of the public that were not here earlier that would like to sign up to speak on any items that are on the agenda? I'd appreciate going to the back over there so that you can sign up and you can speak before. We do have a public input portion of this that comes at the end of the meeting, but if you prefer to speak now, please sign up in the back and we'll get you on board. Excuse me. First person we have on public input is Mr. Ken Roberts. Sir, if you could come to the microphone, we'd appreciate it. Thank you for being here, Mr. Roberts.
Good morning. I'd like to begin with a definition. The word is specious. Specious is an adjective, and it means falsely appearing to be fair, just, or right, or appearing to be true, but actually false. The county administrator told the press last week that a takeover of HART by the policy leadership group was an integral part of a strategy for a massive $6.1 billion tax increase over the next 30 years to fund investments in transportation. Because with this much money on the table, the voters need to have people on this board who are accountable to them, meaning they need to be elected. That assertion and that argument is specious. As I understand it, the idea came from a Booz Allen study, which suggests that somehow an appointed board would not be trusted by the voters as much as an elected one. My question is why? Why on earth, when we know what we know about the track record of elected officials in this county, why then would we feel more secure with a HART board dominated by elected officials, instead of the board that has already produced such a great track record of stewardship? Why? I don't know who Booz Allen talked to, but I don't think it was the voters in this county. When the Urban Land Institute visited 2 years ago, they concluded the county commission's biggest problem in leading us forward was this: nobody trusts them. So what evidence is there that a board of elected officials is preferable for the people of Hillsborough County? You see, nobody's ever been let out of the HART chambers in handcuffs, nor has anyone from this board ever gone to prison for malfeasance or misuse of public money. In this county, I believe that has happened among top elected officials. Now, this is not meant to be an indictment of anybody, any current office holder or any current member of the policy leadership group. This is simply to point out the accountability argument does not hold water. It's specious, and the public's not going to buy it either. They will see this takeover for what it is. It's a naked grab for control of HART's access to federal funds, and it may even inspire them to come out in droves to defeat another referendum again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Next on our list is Robert Pete Edwards. Sir, if you could come to the microphone.
Good morning, everyone. I want to express my concerns after reading the paper about this governance change. In fact, the whole thing that's been going on lately about Heartland, the governance change, the policy leadership group, even talking about putting a tax on at the same time, when every government official who should have been alert to know that the Children's Board referendum is scheduled for the same time. Reference one, the governance. The problem with HART now is that because we don't have enough of a balance of citizens, if you go and ride the bus, people will tell you the only time they've seen HART officials really riding the bus has been for a photo op, either going from downtown to the airport or the Metro Rapid photo op. And when you talk about you all changing it now, it gives the appearance that it not only is it a power grab, but you will go hand in hand with the HART management and have no way of having anybody who's a regular citizen that knows how to ride the bus and can still do budget items, give some balance on this board. It's simply wrong. And then when you're talking about the change, nobody has yet to explain publicly how does this change come into effect, or how does it relate to the other agency out there which nobody understands, and that's Tabata. You have an obligation, we all do that have served on boards, have an obligation to fully vet things to the public. When you don't do that, it appears that you think the public is good enough to ride the bus, but we're not good enough to sit on the board. And that's wrong. It's just simply indefensible. I urge you all to take your time, number one. If you want to change the board, I read the statute, why not put some regular citizens on there? If you can't trust us, then how are we going to trust you? It's simple. Put some more citizens on there and get some of the elected officials off of the board. The second part is explain to the public that if the governance change is made, how would it affect Tabata? How would it affect other issues about whether you merge with the Suncoast Transit Authority? It's going to come up again. You owe the public an obligation to clearly vet and explain what you're doing. And the third thing, if you really want us to see, I strongly urge you not to put that tax on at the same time as the Children's Board tax. I can tell you, I just finished a wonderful 4.5-year term on the Children's Board. And as far as I'm concerned, I would urge all the members of my community to join in with some of the other anti-tax people, and when push comes to shove, the votes you normally count on, especially from the Hispanic and Afro community, will not be there to push this transit tax through, because you're trying to jam it down our throats. At the same time, we're trying to establish the children's referendum and make the things happen with the children. One final thing, you remember the CIT? We tried to do right with that for the schools. It went down the flames, and then it come back with the stadium on it. And what happened? We got a bad stadium deal. Now you're trying to put them both on, again, similar situations. And what's going to happen? We're going to get a bad, we won't get a transit tax at all, and I'm afraid the children will suffer. That's wrong. It's indefensible and it's wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next on our list is Ms. Sharon Calvert. Ma'am. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Welcome, Les. I think I was at USF when you were student government president. Regarding the proposal to restructure, am I aging myself? Regarding the proposal to restructure HART to consist of all elected officials and 2 citizens, we only have to look across the bay to Pinellas PSTA to see some of the issues. As their board consists today of 13 elected officials and 2 citizens. As you know, they are in hot water for misusing some federal Department of Homeland Security Transit Security Grant money, and was forced recently to return about $345,000 back to the DHS under pressure from the media and the public. PSTA has also had some other ethical questions that they've had to deal with in regards to their taxpayer-funded Greenland Pinellas campaign. PSTA may not be a model of accountability to follow. In 2010, the HART board was in lockstep with the referendum, in support of the referendum. This year, HART got and received the ferry grant that the county requested. The process must work. So what is the real reason for a supersized HART consisting of all elected officials? And can HART legally expand its authority? And I would certainly hope not to see any referendum on an off-cycle, low turnout election time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Calvert. Next up is Mr. Michael Newitt, or Newitt. Did I mispronounce that? Thank you, sir, for being here.
My name is Michael Newitt, and I'm a member of the Sierra Club, and I'm on the executive committee, and we're a national organization, and we have about 2,000 members here in Hillsborough County, and we're really glad to see the recent motion to provide additional time and planning resources to take a more comprehensive look at the overall needs involved with a true multimodal transportation system throughout the county. This is why it's necessary for HART to have the resources to carry out a robust public engagement process in the months to come to best determine the full scope of needs for transit options that will meet the needs of the entire county. We're glad you're asking for $500,000 to do this, because you should ask the county for more. It's a big job. We understand that not only do financing and governance need to come together, but also public support from groups like ours if we are to all work together to build a first-class 21st century transit system to meet the future needs of all the residents and the visitors here in Hillsborough County. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Kevin Thurman, sir.
Good evening, board members. Kevin Thurman, Connect Tampa Bay Executive Director, 1220 East Cumberland Avenue, Tampa, Florida. I'm happy to be here today. I'm actually here to comment on the chair's report and the discussion that continues to go towards what is beyond the existing vision plan, or beyond the bus plan as it's termed. And I wanted to state very clearly that I'm very excited about the fact that this board has been looking for new directions in every small and large area, whether it's, you know, trying to work on things like shelters, whether it's huge things like finance, or whether it's setting a really clear vision. And I think that that's something that has been needed for this organization for a long time, and it's been amazing over the last 4 to 5 months since, you know, the TED PLG process has really swung through, that we have seen more activity here, because there's more interest in making sure that there's funding for transit. And I just want to repeat, last time I asked you guys to take the lead, and I'm very excited, as we all are, that you asked the county to say, we need a robust planning process. And I think that one of the things that I would say is that, you know, I'm out in the community every day talking about transportation, which can be kind of, you know, difficult because not everybody sits around and worries about it every single day. There's a huge portion of the population where it's their #1 priority, but other people just take it for granted that it's always going to be bad. And so I think the thing that I would say is that the planning concept, making sure that we take serious time and do meetings in every community, every part of this community, every sector of this community, and moving forward with the transit vision in conjunction with the additional work that the TED PLG has done is the only real way to move forward. We don't need to rush this into, get it done in the next couple of months. We just need to make a dedication that we're going to get it done. And we need to put the county and all of the members of the TED PLG need to commit their time and resources and having a plan that is a long-term public engagement plan to doing so. And I would encourage you that the best way to make sure that governance is cooperated, whether or not we're talking about changing the HART board or not, is that we focus on the goal first and foremost. And that is the first thing that I would encourage, that no matter what is going on, no matter what other debate is going on, that is important. That doesn't mean that we can't sit and live in a world where the idea that money isn't locked in for transit when it's voted in by the voters. I'm fairly sure we're going to get that from the people. I'm not concerned if we go out there and actually talk to everybody, so that we hear voices, not just the ones that stand up in this room, and the same, as many people say, the same 10 faces. We need to get out there and see a lot more faces I haven't even seen. We need to see tens of thousands of faces, really get out in the community and talk about these proposals. And I think that's vital and important. I think the last thing I would say about the governance conversation, I do want to make one thing really clear, and that is that for our organization, for us, it's a matter of everybody on this board has done great. We believe everybody in the county commission has moved great. We believe the only important question is whether or not the money for transit and resources for transit so that there is more options on the ground for the people. The question is, what is going to happen in the end? And that means that we need guarantees, but it also means that we need to make sure that the end product is the focus here, and that's the most important thing.
Next up is Dr. Susan Long.
Susan Long, I'm appalled that this board thinks they're going to get rid of everybody unless they're an elected official. There are many, many people in this county who are perfectly capable of making educated decisions about our transportation issues. One of the things that I heard from my neighbors the last time we had a transportation referendum, which was, 2-3 years ago, was, they haven't told me anything. You think I'm going to give them money and let them do whatever they want to with it? They haven't given me enough information. And to eliminate citizens from this board is just going to exacerbate that. You need to have private citizens, and there are many people who are very educated, very knowledgeable in the areas of transportation, both light rail, roads, buses. I don't happen to be one of them, but there are many who are, and they should be allowed to have a voice on this board and a vote, just like those of you who got elected who don't necessarily have that knowledge in your background. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Phil Compton.
Good morning. Phil Compton, 1430 Park Circle. I'm regional staff for Sierra Club, and I live here in Tampa. I want to mention about the South Shore Transit Circulator Study in light of the conversation that's going on already this morning and the work that's in front of this board and this agency going forward. A few weeks ago, as a member of the South Tampa Chamber of Commerce, I had the opportunity to participate in a meeting that the Greater Tampa Chamber called together of chambers from all over the county. And it was very interesting. I'm a member of the Government Affairs Committee. Sierra Club is a member of several chambers of commerce. So I'm not speaking for the South Tampa Chamber, but simply to tell you that South Shore, Brandon, Sun City Center, South Tampa, various parts of our county went around the table like this, and everyone had their say. No one talked about widening roads. What people want in their community are various expanded, different creative transit services, the type of services that would come under the aegis of an agency such as HART. This is what we're talking about today. This is going out into the community, meeting with people, meeting with the chambers, meeting with the neighborhoods, meeting with every citizen, and getting their input. It was really very interesting. The chamber is going to carry this process forward, but to hear the fact that in South Tampa, we want to have something other than what is already talked about, but something that meets our needs in South Tampa for the small businesses that are currently choked with traffic. Most of the owners of businesses don't live there, they have to commute there, and people have to be able to get there. Every community has its own needs. You are the answer. How do you determine what the answer is? You do the work. And the work will take time, and the work will take money, but it is worth it because it's your job. People want what you are here to deliver. It's much broader and deeper and more extensive than what you are delivering today. And we encourage you to do that and want you to know that people do want this service to be extended to the county. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else in the public that would like to speak at this time? If so, please come forward. I see no one. Thank you very much. Our first presentation is the South County Circulator Study. I think Ms. Sarah McKinley is here from the MPO. Welcome.
Good morning, Sarah McKinley, Hillsborough MPO. This morning I'm going to talk to you about the South Shore Transit Circulator Study. We kicked it off last November, and it lasted a few months, and we just wrapped it up in May with approval from the MPO board. The study was done to look at the growth within the South Shore area. We wanted to reassess the need for transit in the area. There's been tremendous growth within the area. And then this plan was also going to be used for input for the NPO's current long-range transportation plan update, and as well as the HART TDP. The plan was looking at about a 2025 year horizon, but as you'll see, we've actually been able to move that up to a sooner year. The plan was looking at 6 communities: Gibsonton, Riverview, Ruskin, Waimama, Apollo Beach, and the Sun City Center area. Like I said, the study kicked off in November. We had our initial stakeholder meeting where we introduced the study. We presented the existing conditions to the stakeholders, and then we asked them basically, if you were king or queen for the day, what would you like to see in the area? We asked them to identify what are the key destination points currently and what are the key destination points that are emerging in the area. And from that, we were able to form 4 alternatives. In January, we presented the 4 alternatives to the stakeholders. We got their feedback. From that, we were able to modify the alternatives again. In February, we brought them out to a greater public open house. We got additional feedback from the public there, modified the alternatives, and were able to come up with a locally preferred alternative. And then in March, we presented that back to the community, got more reaction. And then since then, it has gone to the MPO board in May. All right. The existing conditions that we have, these are the existing facilities. The commercial centers, as you can see, were identified by the stakeholders. We have the educational facilities in the area, and then the emerging facilities with Amazon and the South Shore, or the new St. Joe's Hospital in the area. And these are those, okay. The existing transit in the area is very focused. It has the existing Route 31 that goes on US 41, the Limited Express 53 that goes from the Brandon Mall to the South Shore area, Sun City area, and then the South County Flex. Okay. These are the 4 alternatives that we came up with. The first alternative is basically beefing up the current HART system and what HART has planned, trying to improve some of the frequencies for the buses, and then also adding an extension out to Fishhawk. The second alternative was a figure 8 alternative, because as you can see, the area, it consists of US 41 and US 301 going north and south, and then we have Gibsonton Road, Big Bend, and 674 as the east-west routes. The third alternative, which was what we began to hear from the public and the stakeholders, was a 2-loop system, a north loop and a south loop, with the HART Flex systems going east and west along Gibsonton, Big Bend, and South County. And then the fourth alternative was, again, the 2-way loops, or the 2-loop systems, but 2 ways rather than going in one singular direction. Through the meetings, like I said, we got tons of input from our stakeholders and from the public. And then we also asked them to rate their favorite alternatives, what they like and dislike about them, and comment on them. Alternative 4 overall was the highest rated alternative, and it was the preferred alternative over most of the responses that we received. We also did a bit of a technical analysis on the alternatives. We looked at 8 performance measures. Those were annual revenue miles, annual revenue hours, annual operating costs, annual projected ridership, passengers per revenue mile, passengers per revenue hour, annual operating costs, and capital costs. And based on those, the second alternative and the fourth alternative were the alternatives that performed the best. So based on the input that we got, the community really preferred alternative 4, and with the performance measures coming out stronger as well, that's what we went with. Working with HART throughout this entire process, we were able to modify the plan and better suit it for the area. What we're proposing is a 2-phase proposal starting in 2020 and then 2022. The first phase would basically implement the 2-way bidirectional loops, the north loop and the south loop, using the smaller 23-foot cutaway buses. And that way, it gives more of a community feel, and it's easier for the buses to move in and out and have better access to the retail areas that were defined and to some of the residential areas that were defined. We also proposed for the northern HART Flex service along Gibsonton Drive, we proposed extending that out to Riverview High School, giving those students better access to the HCC area. We proposed extending the Big Bend Flex out to Summerfield, giving that community better access, and then also extending the South Shore Flex out to Waimama. Okay, and here are the 2 proposed phasing plans that I mentioned. In 2020, like I said, we're proposing adding the bidirectional loops, removing the Route 31 along US 41, and instead realigning the 53LX and extending that to Amazon HCC, and then it'll continue its connection to the Brandon Mall, which gives it access to the rest of the HART system. And then adding an additional bus to the South County Flex, the one along 674. That way, we can beef up the frequencies for that service. And then in 2022, we're proposing adding an additional 3rd bus to that South County Flex, and then implementing the Gibsonton Flex and the Big Bend Flex services. We looked at a few potential funding sources for this. We looked at some of the possibility of public-private partnerships in the area, maybe utilizing some corporate transit programs. I know that in some other the counties, they have deals with some of the hospitals, and with St. Joe's coming, that's a possibility. I know HART has currently a program that they're working and testing out with the Sun City area, and maybe looking into expanding that some more. They currently have programs with the USF area, and maybe extending that and joining with HCC. HCC has mentioned some interest in that as well. And then we looked at a little bit of the Jolly Trolley system that they have in Pinellas, and maybe utilizing that as some of the loop service. All right, do you have any questions or comments for me?
Ms. Davin.
It's a little bit north of 674. I believe it's off of 21st Street. It's just north of there, so it's pretty much pocketed in there.
I know it's on the west side of the expressway, but I can't tell from this what the cross route is.
It's just north of there, off of 21st Street.
Okay. Commissioner Beckner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The funding for this, I was looking through our transportation menus. Is this part, or did we have this in your report? That's what I couldn't definitively find, Catherine.
Yes, sir. It's included in the TDP vision plan. And to the extent that we can make these improvements within the current fleet, we'll roll out these different options within the status quo plan.
So the timing of this could change if funding obviously changed, and if upon successful referendum, et cetera, this could be part of what our offering is to the South County.
Yes, sir, and this is already included in the information that we've shared with the county.
Great,
So we're
thank
very
you.
excited about this.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Merman.
Thank you, and I really want to thank the MPO staff for doing this study, because I think I had to pull them down to HCC, kicking and screaming, to meet with all the citizens, and because it's just, the area has been so depressed for so long. They just have not had anything to answer their transportation need. And I think a great plan. Ray Shermonte really took the comments of the citizens to heart in that community and came back and really did the circulator study based on my request. And so I really want to thank you. And I hope that it doesn't stop with this vision right here, because I do believe that there is room for connectivity. It's fine to have it all within the community, but we have to figure out also how to connect South County to the rest of Hillsborough County. And I know in a proposed project list that we have coming out of the PLG, I have a bus rapid transit going down 301 to connect to Hub and Brandon that would also connect people to downtown. So I think that's going to be very important. Of course, the ferry service, if it does become a reality, also will be very important. But I think in the meantime, if we did have extra funding, it would really behoove us to get some extra buses and run express service for all the MacDill employees. I guess there are 5,300 families that live in South County. We could start a robust express bus service with no stops from a park and ride somewhere all the way into to MacDill. I do think that can happen sooner than later. We don't need to wait and see if the ferry is going to take place or not, because we just don't know right now. I mean, it's $26 million, and we have to make that decision as part of our policy leadership group. So I think there's more vision that we can put to this. This is a great first start for us, though, and it really outlines, I think, the need of what's going on in South County, because there's a lot of things happening down there. As you know, Amazon, they're now going to hire up to 1,500 employees, not 1,000 that we thought, and they have parking spaces for up to 2,500 employees. So I think that there's a lot more capability. HCC is doubling the size of their campus, doubling the size of their campus. Just the connectivity for the high schools, for kids to take, I know you've worked on that, Commissioner Beckner, these young students to take public transportation, not just to HCC, but to high school, get them off the roads, because we don't have a lot of sidewalks down that area. It's a public safety issue. So there's plenty of more things we can do, but great job, great first start. Thank you very much.
And your car isn't big enough, Commissioner Merman.
No, it's not.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions or comments about this study? Before I go on, Ms. McKinley, I remember this report from our MPO meeting, and I think Alternative 4 was presented at that time also. The amount I believe you had mentioned at that time in order to institute Alternative 4 was $10 million or somewhere in that range?
Well, it was originally a little over $8 million,
$8 million,
but
I
with the
apologize.
modifications we did utilizing the smaller buses and everything, we got it down to about 4.7.
4.7 million?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Next on our agenda is Mr. Justin Day from the Advocacy Group. He is our state legislative representative and advocate. Sir, you have the floor. Please tell us if we got some good news, or at least not bad news.
All right. Well, thank you all for having me today. I'm really thrilled at the turnout to hear my presentation. So that's makes me feel good. So I just want to start on behalf of the advocacy group. We want to thank the board and the leadership here for the opportunity to represent HART over the last legislative session. We have thoroughly enjoyed our relationship representing this agency, working with the leadership and Catherine here up in Tallahassee. So as a Hillsborough County resident, I've personally enjoyed my time representing the agency and have taken great pride in representing HART. So thank you all for the opportunity. I know it's a slow day for you all, and so I've been given the leeway to give you a very thorough and detailed analysis of every bill that has come up before session, starting with House Bill 1 and running through all 2,000. So if you're okay with that, I'll start.
This is like the read the bill exercise when they don't like something that's about to come up.
Yeah.
So in all seriousness, though.
Was there not? There was.
So we feel there have been some tangible gains made towards your objectives and your goals, and believe that is due to large part to our relationships and our partnerships that we have made in Tallahassee with HART. More importantly, we've continued to build support for the agency and compelled policymakers to embrace your issues. We have met with the entire Hillsborough County delegation, most members of BALD, which is the Bay Area Legislative Delegation, which encompasses the entire Bay Area, keeping them updated on the successes and the legislative priorities of HART over the last 2 sessions. As many of you know, the 2014-15 budget was a record budget, great year for the budget in Florida. It was a $77.1 billion budget, the largest ever, $69 million in vetoes, which was the lowest in the last 4 years. And out of that $77.1 billion, $582 million was set aside for public transportation, public transit development grants last year, which was an increase of over $160 million from the year before. So obviously a really good year for public transit in Tallahassee. Even with that increase, our firm worked with the Florida Public Transit Association to try to find some additional funds last year, and we actually had an amendment that we thought we could get into a bill to increase some funding. Unfortunately, could not get a hearing on the floor. But I think the good news, the takeaway from that is there's some support to increase funding additionally in Tallahassee for transit, and I think next year we've got the ball rolling. From a legislative standpoint, very slow year. There were over 2,000 bills that were filed, and out of the 2,000, only 255 actually passed. So as Commissioner Merman and Miller, who've been in Tallahassee, understand that's not a lot of bills that passed this past year. Even less related when it comes to transit-related bills. We tracked 69 bills this year for HART. Those are bills that we thought could either affect HART one way or the other. Ironically, though, that was up from 57 last year. So even though there were less bills that passed, we were tracking more bills for you. I wanted to keep my comments short and take questions, but I did want to comment a little bit on the 2015 session and what that may look like for HART. You all obviously have a very important discussion you're going to be having later this morning, and the county leaders will be having ongoing. And I think as long as that discussion of what transportation is going to look like for the future for this agency and for this county, legislation in Tallahassee that may affect HART will probably be lean. There probably won't be a whole lot over the next year or 2 years or however long this process may take. And so I do believe that with the possibility of a referendum on the ballot, the potential that this agency will look differently. The legislature will introduce very little over the next 2 years that would affect HART directly. One area where I think HART and the transit community in general can look forward and should be on the offensive next year is certainly in funding, as I discussed before. I think all our early indications show that next year should be another record year for the state budget, and I do think there's a possibility of being able to increase state transit funds again going into next year. And so with that, I tried to keep it short because I do know you have a long agenda. I'll take any questions, but I do want to thank you all again for the opportunity over the last 2 sessions. Really enjoyed it, and I'll take some questions if anybody has any.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Any questions? Commissioner Merman. You want him first? Okay, sure.
Justin, I know last year, relatively late in the process, we began to discuss the prospect of approaching FDOT in the legislature as it relates to the insurance liability with the streetcar and the CSX crossing. Can you give me some thoughts or some idea now that we're getting ready for the next session as to how we might be most effective in proceeding with that this year?
Well, fortunately, and I worked with David last year on this on the language. Fortunately, we have the language. Unfortunately, last year, by the time we had the language ready for an amendment to the FDOT bill, I think it was a little late in the process to get that into the bill. It would have certainly muddied that bill up. Going back to my comments about 2015, I think as long as this conversation about transportation in Hillsborough County is on the table, it's certainly going to be an uphill putt to get that language, I think, or a bill put into place. But it's certainly something we understand is important to HART and is still on our radar and something we're going to continue to work on.
Okay. Commissioner Merman?
Thank you, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what I was going to bring up. But I actually got involved in that discussion this year, working with Senator Brandes and the mayor in CSX, and I think it was, I think it just got too late in the session. CSX was starting to get comfortable with some language that Senator Brandes could put in the omnibus transportation bill, and I think that's how we have to approach it this year, that it not be a bill on its own, that it be added to the big transportation policy bill, because I do know the mayor just needs to get to a comfort level on his liability.
Right.
And I think CSX was having discussions with Senator Brandes about that. So if I would ask you, please follow up with Senator Brandes, ask her where that landed, and then that will be our starting point as we go forward this next year.
And I think you're exactly right. I think the problem last year was a little late in the process by the time we were able to get that language and put it into, try to amend it to the FDOT bill, and
Right.
I think it would have muddied that bill up a lot and maybe caused larger concerns.
Right.
So.
Okay. Any other questions of Mr. Day? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. Okay. Next on the agenda, we have our Operations Division Key Performance Indicators, or KPIs. I think we have Ruthie, if you're here. Thank you.
Good morning, board members and Chair. Thank you for this. Ruthie Reyes-Burkhardt, Interim Chief Operating Officer.
Ruthie, I'll pull the microphone a little closer to you when you speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Except I can't see these. Okay, good morning. So our KPIs are our key performance indicators in operations, and in operations we are looking at our on-time performance of our fixed route, our complaints per 100,000 passengers, and our mean distance between failures on fixed route. We've been reporting on these type of indicators historically and through NTD, and our first one we're looking at this morning is our on-time performance, and we've been measuring since FY08. And on-time performance is measured by 1 minute early up to 5 minutes late on scheduled time points. Our measure is greater than 72%. And this year-to-date average, we are at 74.9%. So this is a banner year for us. We've beat our own goal this year so far. And so compared to FY13, we're at 74.9% compared to 72% in 13. And some of the factors that affect our on-time performance would be the detours that we experience, whether they're planned or unplanned, due to disruption, accidents, water main breaks, trains, railroad crossing delays. Crowded buses, obviously we're okay with that. We would like to see more passengers on board. And increased traffic congestion as well. Our complaints per 100,000.
Ruthie, excuse me.
Yep.
Director.
We also have some benchmarks here that we compare.
We'll get benchmarks from our industry partners and circulate them out to the board. When we look at on-time performance, we make sure that we measure ourselves only against other properties doing 1 minute early to 5 minutes late. By way of comparison, Metro in DC has 3 minutes early to 10 minutes late. And I would expect, the percentage from a property like that to be different than ours. But we'll go ahead and reach out to our peers and bring that back. I would like also to stress that the month we just wrapped, July, we're at over 78% on-time performance, so we do continue to improve. But that is a good question from Commissioner Merman and also Director David. Without a benchmark, it's hard to know what that actually means. So we'll get that back out.
These aren't any of the benchmarks we've adopted as annual.
Yes, ma'am. These are your annual ones. Certain of these live primarily in operations, and so Ruthie today is giving a snapshot on how we're doing against the adopted board standards. So again, on-time performance adopted standard annually is 72%. Yes, ma'am. The complaints per 100,000 passengers is 10. And Ruthie's going to get into more information on that. And miles between failures is 6,800 miles between major vehicular failures. So this is a snapshot to say how we're doing. And when we come back next month, if there are recommendations to modify those measures, it'll be based on this information that you're getting today.
Commissioner Merman.
Thank you, and I'll just add to your comments, because those are very on target. Because what I asked her is what is best practices? And it's about 80%. So we know we can do better. We were at 78%, I guess, the year before, and it's dropped a little.
Last month, actually, 78% in July.
I do think it's important, though, when we get these reports, it's very important that we have that measurement next to whatever the performance is, because you can't really evaluate it when you're just getting the number of what the actual performance is.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions or comments on that? Go ahead, Ruth.
Thank you. Actually, our complaints per 100,000 is equal to or less than 11.5 complaints per 100,000 passengers, and fiscal year to date, we are at 13.61. And our top two complaints are lates and pass by, and so how we look at that is through investigation and mitigation. And in comparison to FY13, we're just a notch above that at 1307 and 13. And our most common complaint is pass-by complaints. Year to date, 371 so far, 38 in June, 200 total complaints in June. That was a little high for us. They're separate from our other complaints. We're looking at whether the passenger was at the stop. We look at video. We interview operators. We look at trends, whether that particular operator has a standing recurring issue, and we look at the timing on the route. Was it in service? Was it coming back to the garage? Was it on detour? We look at a number of things of why simply the bus may have not picked up the customer.
Ruthie, before you go on, I have one question.
Sure.
Of those, these pass-by complaints, what is our standard in terms of to not pass by? I know that these are some of the things that have been reported back, but
right.
what is our standard in terms of, look, this is when you do not pass by someone, is it near the stop, somebody's running towards the stop?
Within 20 or so feet of the bus stop, about 20 or less, yeah. Within the bus stop range where we can see you standing and alert maybe would be a nice thing, and making intentions to catch the bus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councilman,
Go ahead, Commissioner Miller.
Is there a way that we can break down what areas or what stops or what routes these most of these
we can bring that back if you'd like. We certainly could. We measure by the particular complaint will give us the route, the bus stop level, so we can come back with that.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Ruthie.
Sure. And our late complaints, our second most common complaint, 254 late complaints year to date, 26 in June of the 200. And in some cases, our own technology is getting us at that. Our One Bus Away app gives you an estimated time, and some of our customers are using that as a scheduled time point per se, but that's an estimated time. When we have a time point, that's the time the bus is expected, no more than a minute early, no more than 5 minutes late, but somewhere in between those two time points, there may be an estimated time, and the customer may be over-relying on that technology. They may be misreading, they may have the wrong time, and again, just maybe just sheer traffic and detours and things that put us off time and off schedule. And our mean distance between failures, and this is greater than or equal to 6,800 mean distance between failures on our fixed route. Paratransit is not included in this measure. This is just strictly fixed route. And we're just a notch below that goal of 6778 year to date. It would be 6,800 would be exceeding the goal. And what we found is that our top three issues that we're seeing for failures is coolant, engines, and transmissions. And some of this is very, very clearly just due to the age of the fleet. Some of it is, we're looking at some computer issues. We're working with the Cummins warranty. It's a nationwide back order on that, and we're trying to get those things fixed. Intermittent sensors and, well, transmissions that are due for replacement. And so we're aging on purpose due to the SLEP, Service Life Extension Plan, and we're looking at new engines and transmissions, new fleet next year. 22 of those buses will be replaced for those CNG buses, first in the fixed route fleet that will be CNG. And we are looking at some additional staff to help maintenance gather all that data, get all that work done, and get all those replacements done. Inside of that, the older age of the fleet, in 14, we're averaging about 8 years of age in the fixed route fleet, and in 15, we're looking at about 8 years average age of fleet. And we're changing out in 15, 33 engines and transmissions, and 14 of the current fleet have reached the end of their useful life, and also 14 transmissions. And engines will be replaced for a total 47, and FY15 will be swapped out between engines and transmissions. On average, we do 14 a year. So that's a bigger number that we'll be handling next year in terms of engines and transmissions being replaced.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ruthie? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Good report. All right, next up, Mr. Stevens, our Chief Business Enterprise and Safety Officer. He's going to give us an update on the security at our Marion Transit Center. Sir.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, good morning. Michael Stevens, Chief Business Enterprise and Safety Officer. This morning's update is a very brief review about our security initiatives at our transit centers, as well as on some of our vehicles. I want to start with a very quick and brief historical overview. In approximately FY 2008, our budget was about $424,000 and some change. And what this bought us was essentially 24/7 coverage at our Marion Transit facility and our 21st Avenue bus facility with contracted security services. We also had TPD coverage at the Marion Transit facility from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then we had coverage at 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. at our UATC facility. However, as a result of some of the financial pressures on the agency and some of the downturns that we had with the economy, some of that changed in FY 2009. Our budget went down to $197,000 approximately, and most of those coverage reductions, as I alluded to, were due to funding limitations. We still had coverage with TPD. They still patrol the Marion Transit Way and our Marion Transit Center facility. We also had contracted security services at the Marion Transit facility. However, that was reduced a little bit in terms of that coverage. We removed the security services from UATC, and our 21st Avenue facility, we reduced the amount of time that we had the rear gate guard patrolling the facility and the perimeter. I want to talk about where we are today. Essentially, our current budget is about $240,000, which represents approximately half of where it was in 2008. At the same time, we've had increases in transit center activity due to dramatic increases in ridership. The number of our current security assets as a result of this just simply aren't sufficient. We are always looking for ways to enhance the security of the agency. Obviously, the safety and security of our riders, of our employees, and of our facilities are of paramount importance, so we're looking at ways that we can do things better. We've had a few increases in customer complaints as a result of the increased activity that we've seen in a lot of our transit facilities as a result of our ridership. However, we have still enjoyed tremendous support from the Tampa Police Department. They have still been excellent in providing us coverage, particularly along the Marion Transway, as well as the coverage that we receive with our agreement with the Sheriff's Department. They provide excellent coverage in the other areas of service. Notwithstanding a lot of these events and activities, when you consider our ridership, when you consider the numbers of trips that we have per year, millions of trips, HART is a very, very safe system. In fact, very recently we went through what's called the TSA, the Transportation Security Agency's BASE assessment, which stands for Baseline Assessment and Security Enhancement. And what that is, it's almost a security audit that the feds come down and they do, and they go through a very, very rigorous process. We effectively got our results probably about 2 months ago. I think there was a report made to the board and a board update, and we essentially achieved the gold medal of that base assessment report, which puts us in approximately the top 9% of transit agencies in the country when it comes to our security. But again, we can always do better. As you all know, our buses, all of our buses feature security video cameras. So we're able to remotely monitor, or excuse me, we're able to monitor activity on our buses. We're working in conjunction with the Grants Department under the leadership of Jeannie Satchel to go out and find additional monies where we can enhance security on our vehicles. We want to get video camera recording devices on our our paratransit vehicles, which we currently do not have, but we're looking to make that a reality for the agency. Some of the things that we're doing, as I said, we always can do better. So some of the things that we're doing as our risk mitigation strategies. One thing that we want to do and we're looking at doing now is enhancing, again, our contracted security services. So to bring us back to those 2008 levels where we'll have additional visibility and security at our Marion Transit facilities, as well as UATC, and as well as our 21st Avenue facility. We also are looking at increasing our transit supervisor presence at our transit facilities to deter, that kind of activity that you want to kind of get when, or that you get when you have those spikes in ridership. So they see something while they're not law enforcement, they act as our eyes and ears out there at our facilities and within our service area. So we also make sure that we provide them with training on what to recognize, suspicious behaviors, things that look somewhat out of sorts. Also, increased TPD patrols at MTC, as well as our Hillsborough Sheriff's assets that we work with very closely at UATC. One thing that I want to say as well with some of these risk mitigation strategies, not only have they been very successful in helping out secure our facilities and our service area, they've been very instrumental in assisting local law enforcement. Many times when we have an incident, there's some crime that's committed, whether it's on our facilities or whether it's somewhere within our service area, because our buses have video on them, very often the Tampa Police Department or the Sheriff's Office, we will be their first stop. They'll come over and they will engage us and they will get a video feed, and it's been very instrumental in helping deter crime and resolve some open cases for them. We also are continuing to partner with TPD, particularly at the Marion Transit facility. They are in discussions, or we're in discussions with them to get remote CCTV monitoring booths that will be an additional presence at our transit facilities, so they can monitor them from afar, and then they can relay to our dispatch if there's some issues where our road supervisors need to go out there and take a look. And also, it also acts as an additional set of eyes for them as well. And finally, awareness training given to all of our HART employees. Again, you see something, say something. If you see some activity that doesn't look right, they have a mechanism where they can report to dispatch, and dispatch can then contact the local law enforcement agencies and get someone on site. So the takeaway from this is that we are doing very well on our security for our transit facilities, for our employees, as well as for our patrons, but we can always do better. As you all know, there have been a couple of instances recently, and we take those very seriously and have been working to reduce those risks in as much as we can, recognizing that we can never reduce all of our security risks, but we can certainly make sure that our patrons continue to have a very safe and effective transit system.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stevens. Any questions about his report? Mr. Bergen.
Mr. Stevens, thank you for bringing this presentation. You alluded to at the end a couple incidents, and as board members, obviously, we get notifications of these things. And so I'm glad that you brought this issue to our attention, in particular the funding levels. And I'm curious, because this very much feels like a staging presentation. When can we expect a proposal that might beef up some of the areas where you and other staff members think need additional support?
Absolutely. Well, actually, under Ms. Egan's direction, we've already gone down that path to contact the security firm that we use right now to get some additional assets on our UATC as well as our Marion Transit facilities, primarily the Marion Transit facilities, particularly with the megabus activity. We've already priced it out. We've already entered into some discussions about what that would look like. So these are things that we can do right now under the current contract.
Very good.
Okay, great. Commissioner Merman.
To follow up on...
Oh, I apologize. I had Commissioner Beckner, then you. I apologize. Commissioner Beckner, I apologize.
Thank you. What is the... you had mentioned that in part of your report, Michael, that you'd seen that there had been some increases in incidences of activities. How does that correlate with the funding? You had also mentioned that there had been a decrease in funding over the years. Is there a correlation with the amount of decrease in funding versus increase in incidences?
Commissioner, while we have not necessarily done a direct correlation anecdotally, when you did see a reduction in the amount of funding that we had, in other words, the amount of visibility that we can have at a particular facility, MTC, for example, you will see a little increase in instances, and we have seen that, of loitering folks that are hanging around that aren't necessarily using our transit facilities. And generally, when you have that type of activity, as you know, being a former LEO yourself, you're going to have those potential increases in criminal activity that may follow. So we have anecdotally seen, as the funding has gone down, a slight increase in some of the complaints that we've received.
All right. I would just, I mean, obviously security to our passengers needs to be one of our top priorities. So as Mr. Burgeon alluded to, you know, if we need to beef up funding, it'd be my expectation that our board or that our director would bring that attention to our board if we need to secure additional resources for security.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Right, and I agree with all comments. Have you had any discussions with the city about possibly using some of the cameras that they have left over from the RNC?
We actually have. In fact, some of the CCTV, the remote monitoring booths and stations, those are some that are left over from the RNC. And the city has been very, very helpful and very forthcoming in trying to offer different support to us to enhance their visibility as well as the security profile of our facility.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions from Mr. Stevens? I see no one. Michael,
All right,
thank you very much for the presentation. All right, that ends all of our presentations. There is a, because of what has happened over the last few weeks, I know that Director Davin had made a comment at our last regular meeting concerning what direction we should take in, concerning the policy leadership group and some of their ideas. I had asked the staff to give all of you a copy of what has been presented last week by the policy leadership group. That should be in your possession. If you haven't read it already, you probably will at some point. But before I go on, I'd like to read two things into the record. Ms. Karen Jarosh, who is a regular board member here and usually is not absent, she said that she was unable to attend today's meeting because she's out of the country on a long-planned family vacation. She wanted me to also read a statement that she had concerning this specific issue. I didn't read it earlier because I didn't think it was appropriate before we did our presentations. This letter is to all of the board members. It's with deep regret that I am unable to attend today's HART board meeting, and while I am physically located out of the country on a long-planned family vacation, be assured that at the moment my thoughts are with this board and the decision that will take place whether to agree or not with the proposed change in HART's governance. The composition of the HART board was prescribed over 30 years ago by state statute and then memorialized in the charter voted in by Hillsborough County citizens. The diversity of the board outlined in these documents have met the test of time. The recent rush to not only reformulate the board, but to greatly increase its scope is fraught with many unintended consequences that, in my opinion, may interrupt the balance of powers and, more importantly, disrupt the mobility of many who rely on HART to supply their transportation needs. Currently, the number of county commissioners coincidentally matches the number of county seats on HART's board. This was not the case 2.5 years ago when population growth added an additional county representative. This will also not be the case in approximately 3 years when it is anticipated that growth in the county may open up another county seat. What happens then? The charter states that HART directors shall be appointed to serve 3 years. What happens if an elected official is appointed but his term expires before the 3 years is up? State law says that they can only be removed for misconduct, malfeasance, or neglect of duty in office. What happens then? The proposal allows for the mayor of Plant City to sit on the HART board, yet the charter and state law do not grant a representative from a non-member jurisdiction this privilege. What happens then? Currently, elected officials sit on a variety of boards which consume a lot of time and attention. Citizen appointees are limited to serving on one board because it is recognized that to do the job properly, they need to focus their time and attention. What happens to the careful oversight of this board when it is filled entirely with electeds whose time is already subdivided so much by their other duties or by re-election activities? I personally sit on I personally sit on HART's Finance Committee and Audit Committee, and coupled with regular HART board meetings, these activities amount to a part-time job. And she did put an exclamation point on there, and I want to make sure I didn't read it that way, but that's what she put. There are also issues with the proposed change of scope for HART. The charter states explicitly that HART is to provide mass transit to the public. The terms mass transit and public transportation are interchangeable terms and defined as the movement of people within urban areas using group travel such as buses. HART staff does not have the expertise to oversee expanded roles such as roadway design and construction. Inserting all elected officials on HART necessarily means that member jurisdictions cannot appoint citizens that round out the skill set of its directors. Citizens like Dr. Poseen, whose vast knowledge of public transportation as a director of mobility research at USF's Qatar, will be missed. Citizens like Fran Davin, whose statesmanship and institutional knowledge of HART and city and county government play an invaluable role. Others are experienced in finance, engineering, and real estate, all disciplines that add much value to the board. Some will argue that there is no accountability with the current system. I disagree. Just as electeds can be voted out of office when their term expires, similarly, appointeds can be voted out by member jurisdictions when their term expires. Some will say there is no transparency. Again, I disagree. Citizen appointees follow the same rigorous financial disclosures required of electeds and also must abide by the same ethical standards. Thank you so much for your consideration of my views and your deliberations on this weighty matter before the board. I hope you vote to keep the HART board composition in its current state consistent with its charter and with state law. Sincerely, Karen Jarosh. We appreciate Director Jarosh's words. We're sorry that she's not here today. She always brings a lot to the discussion. Ms. Davin, I'm going to recognize you. If you, at the last board meeting, we had this discussion, you were pretty emphatic in terms of your ideas concerning the governance of this board. And if that's all right, I'll start with you with this discussion.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Director Jarosh made a number of good points. I think the only thing I would like to add to the discussion this morning is I'd like to reiterate what I said on several previous occasions. And that is, I don't think this is helpful to the citizens or to the outcome of a potential referendum if we get into confrontation. I think everyone in this room that has a role in transit, whether it be the citizens who gave their input this morning, whether it be staff or any of us that serve, I think we all want the same result. I think that result is a much better system of transportation for this county. And I really am troubled that we're not going about it in the right way. If we have a whole sub-discussion and sub-issue of governance, I think that, first of all, takes away from focus on the projects and the final list that we're all going to want to agree upon so it can go ahead to the public with total consensus. There may be criticisms of the way our counterpart across the bay has gone about things. I think one thing they have done absolutely right is they spent a lot of time in preparation of their list of projects, what they wanted to accomplish long range for their county, and they all agreed upon that plan. They're marching forward in lockstep from the elected officials, from the appointed officials, from the staff, and from public leadership. We want to go about it the same way, and I think the discussion on governance has already become a contentious issue. I don't think it helps particularly for us to reach our goal, which is consensus on a countywide plan to go in front of the voters. I think we ought to set aside that divisive issue. I don't think it's necessary to even entertain it at this time. The focus ought to be on what we want to accomplish, not what the composition of people around this table is. I think there are good arguments being made by various points of view, and they all deserve consideration, respectful consideration, but I don't think they're critical right now. I think what we ought to be doing is concentrating in the best way that all parties, the county, the city, and this board can, to scrub all of the projects that might be considered, go out to the public, as has been suggested many times by members of this board, as well as members of key organizations. Go out to the public and get consensus on where we're going in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. You know, I don't think politics is an influence now in HART decision-making, and I don't want to see politics become an issue in HART decision-making. I would just hope that we could set aside the divisiveness of the governance issue and concentrate on where we actually want to get. I mean, I could make a lot of statements about why I think that the governance model of citizens and elected officials best serves us, but then other people who have a different point of view could make arguments back to me. I would take issue with one thing, and I think this is very important, because I think it's going to be very important to all of you in framing your decisions and putting a referendum out to the public. I think it's going to be very important that there be trust in what's presented. And I was disappointed to hear some comments and read in the paper that there would be more trust in an elected board than in a mixed board. I think that's a false issue. I think the performance of this agency shows that there is a lot of trust from other governmental agencies and from the public. So I don't think the trust issue ought to be one of the considerations here. I would hope that we could, all of us, agree to set aside the contentious issue of governance and get on with planning the important issues, which are what projects we're going to offer to the public.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments right now? Mr. Bowers.
Yes, I'd just like to echo some of the things that Director Davin and as well as Director Jarosh have said, because I agree with everything that they have said, and I also believe that with this agency, we have come a long ways. Our primary goal is to provide transportation for all the citizens of this community. I believe this board has done a fantastic job in trying to meet those challenges. To disrupt that process now may not be the best interest of the board or the organization for whatever reason we say that the reason is. I think that having citizens' involvement does give a balance to this board in terms of trust. I do not believe that an all-elected board will add to any trust or distrust to the board, but I do believe that we need to be consistent and working very diligently to meet the needs of all the citizens of this community as it relates to transportation with all the projects that we have. Let us continue to focus on that and cooperate with all the other agencies necessary to meet those goals. And I think we're already doing that. Just spoke with someone last week who brought up the subject of merging and that kind of thing, or changing of the governance, and their thought was to get more money or to save money. And if my memory served me correctly, most of our funds are spent on the transport of people only. Very little is spent on administrative things of that nature. So when we look at the merger side, it does not give us that kind of return that we want. When we look at the governance side, I think that, again, as Director Giroux so clearly delineated in her letter, we are hitting every point that we need to hit with the citizens and all involvement. And I just believe that it's not the time to upset that kind of operation when we are in the forefront of our movement. And I would just urge this board to let's keep on task rather than be sidetracked by some political issue.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions, or Commissioner Sharp?
First, I actually agree with many of the comments that I've heard, both from Mr. Roche and the citizens regarding the absolute importance, and Ms. Davin and Mr. Bowers, of making sure that the citizens can trust this process. There's no question that if we try to go forward, whether it's 2016 or whenever it might be, if the citizens don't have confidence in us, it's going to make our task that much more challenging. One of the concerns that the policy leadership group dealt with early on, though, was this issue of governance and the importance of making sure that as we look at financing and how we're going to finance large projects, what potentially could be a very significant growth in the budget of HART from approximately $86 million to billions of dollars, that we address an issue which in 2010 we really waited until the very end. There was a rush to get to the issue of governance, and I set through some of the conversations as to how the money would even flow and the confusing requirements that all the different jurisdictions would have with regard to the completion of projects. And it wasn't that we had neglected to consider, it was just that there were so many things we were trying to deal with and balance. Governance came at the end, and that's something that we ought to take very seriously. I would ask that I think that in the spirit of what Ms. Davin said, which is that there shouldn't be a lot of acrimony over this, and I agree, we ought to go into the conversation on the 12th with both our chairman and the executive director of HART. They understand, I think, the sentiment perhaps of many in this room, and we can go forward and talk about the actual, and present to the full policy leadership group the sentiment of this board with regard to governance. And, but I also think as well, because we were talking, there's the issue of who sits on the board, and I would love to see and think we should find a way to make sure that there's a citizen representative on the board. I have no problem with that at all. I do believe that as the budget grows, having individuals who are directly accountable to the citizens makes sense, but that doesn't exclude having other members. There are attorneys and staff members and others who are far more schooled on what the appropriateness would be of a board composition. My focus is on moving. When I look at budget, when I look at where we sit as an organization, and Mr. Bergen discussed this issue about where our budget will be in 2016 and 17 and 18, the possibility that if we, as we've slimmed down our budget, that we could reach a point in 2017 or 18 when we don't have the revenue to operate even the system as it stands today, that we'd have to cut back on service. To me, that is outrageous, and we shouldn't do that. And when you look at the growing demand, not only here, but across the country for transit services, it calls for a more robust system. We're competing with systems from Seattle with 1,459 buses, and that was in 2012. Phoenix, 1,281. Houston, 1,251. Denver, 1,035. Miami, 863. Dallas, 662. Atlanta, 600. Tampa, 173 buses. You can't compete. We can't attract business. Forbes magazine last week had a rankings of the best places for businesses. We ranked 72. Milken looked at the best performing cities for 2013. We ranked 93. Now that doesn't mean we can't find rankings where our numbers are higher, but I've never been satisfied being 93 or 72. We're a top 10, top 20, and that means we need the resources. So I would agree with you. Let's agree on how we can move forward and discuss the composition of the board itself. I think, and in fact, there's been a lot of misunderstanding about whether or not we're going to do road projects and build roads. I just received it this morning, but there was I thought, some clarification that came from the policy leadership group regarding that issue. And it talks about, will HART build roads and other non-transit infrastructure under the policy leadership group proposal? This is item point number 6. In the report, it says the policy leadership comprehensive mobility proposal includes many non-transit projects options designed to improve communities throughout the county and to facilitate economic development and job creation. Any funding for these non-transit projects would be allocated to the cities in the county for their use in constructing these non-transit projects. Under the proposal, HART would be responsible for public transit projects for transportation facilities necessary to support transit projects and for the transportation facilities necessary to construct and operate an integrated public mass transit system. I think that's an important conversation to have. Every study, and the one thing that the policy leadership group has done is gone back and reviewed all the studies looking back to 1988. There have been a lot of them, talking about the problems with our transit system, where we stand, what we need to do. We're not afraid to have a study. Our hesitancy has been on moving forward on any of them. But in the studies, it's all suggested that as our population grows, and it's going to, as our employment centers grow, and they're going to, the need for a robust transit system is going to increase, and we don't have the system in place. And you just can't add more buses, because as you add more buses, for any of us who've ever traveled behind one on a busy thoroughfare, if you don't have bus bays or a system in place to handle the buses, it blocks the cars. So there needs to be an integrated system. And that's one of the reasons why the policy leadership group has stressed the importance of bringing it together. So I would just ask and urge, and I think that our chairman has done an excellent job at our policy leadership group meetings expressing his sentiment and the sentiment of this board. I would ask that you go there in the spirit of working together for the purposes of trying to bring more resources to this agency. It will never be perfect. There's always going to be a referendum of another election of something else. Mr. Edwards brought up a good point about 2016. Do we wait to 2018, 2020? If we do it in 2015, we've got citizens here who will rise up immediately and state we shouldn't be doing it in 2015. There's never going to be a perfect time. There's always going to be political considerations. But if we do nothing, we're going to fall back. So I would urge us to move forward and to not let this little dispute, if there is one, stop us from doing what we have to do. I'm done. Thank you.
Anyone else like to make a comment? Commissioner Miller.
Well, I'm new to this board. I'm not new to transportation. I agree with what a lot has been said. And the numbers that Commissioner Sharp just ran off to us about buses throughout this country compared to Hillsborough County is dismal. And I'm not going to be long. I agree with you to a certain extent. The governors may have been the downfall of 2010, but I agree more that the downfall of 2010 was not getting the message out to the entire county about what was going to happen with their sales tax increase. And that's what's going to have to happen with this proposal we're talking about now. We have got to do something to enhance our transportation, whether it's buses, light rail, roads, trails, whatever the case may be. The proposal that has come out by the policy leadership group is fantastic. I think that it outlines some things that need to be looked at. But we can't get out the box. We can't get the team together if we're going to have a discussion and a fight over governance. It's just not going to work that way. We can't take something to the public if we, as elected officials and those who sit on this board, are going to disagree on what the governance aspects are going to look like. Why would we even think about doing that? Because we're doomed before we even get out the box. So I agree with what I've heard from Director Davin and Director Wallace, and I agree with what you said, Commissioner Sharp. But I do believe that before we can do anything, before we take it to the public, and it's already hit the papers, then we've got some problems already. And problems are going to kill us. You're talking about the year 2000, I think it was 30 or 40, where we're going to have 800,000 more citizens in Hillsborough County. Just face the facts. That's 800,000 that fill out the Census Bureau forms. You're probably talking about another million that we're talking about, additional 200,000. Where are we going to be if we don't get something done? We've got to get our house in order before we take anything else to someone else's house. So I think that we need to go back some way, somehow. The chairman sits on the policy group committee, and let's work this thing out. Because if we don't, why even consider putting it on the ballot? Because it's going to fail. Because we don't have the proper wherewithal within our own selves to come together with who's going to govern this whole process of however much money we're going to have. The numbers we have are dismal. We know what our transportation problems are. We see it we ride them every day. The lady just came up and talked about why we have such late buses sometimes. Traffic congestion, terrible roads. Come on. What are we going to do about that? We want to increase our bus system. We want to do whatever we need to do. If we're not on the same sheet of music, we sound like my grandchildren trying to sing. Uncle sing pretty good, though. I take that.
I was going to say.
Let's get it together, folks. I mean, let's get it together, get on the same sheet of music, and let's take this thing forward to the public to let them know what we need to make their lives better, economically, transportation-wise, the whole works. We're talking about this bringing jobs. The Florida Sentinel called me to this. How many jobs are going to bring? I have no idea. But if this passes, it will be a lot of jobs. And that's one of the important things that specifically minority communities are looking at, because they're the ones that suffer the most in unemployment. They don't have the jobs. This happens, they're looking down the road, jobs, jobs, jobs. But if we can't get off the same sheet of music, forget the jobs. We're done. So let's come together, folks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Director Bergen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I'd like to start out by saying directly to Mr. Sharp, I respect you. We have our share of scars from each other, and everybody knows that, and we've laughed about that a couple of times. But you've continuously stayed focused on the things that you believe are important. And as I was considering, coming into this meeting and what this conversation might look like, I was reminded of an article that came out of a June 2013 meeting where I had made the comment about putting together a plan that didn't offend conservatives. And as we've gone forward, and at the time Mark, you described the fact that the plan was going to be inclusive, it was going to bring everybody in, and no disrespect, the policy leadership group has been largely elected officials, and those who wanted to attend could attend, and I'm sure there's been some public comment. But I'm really surprised by the thought, the consideration of the policy leadership group to eliminate this board as it currently is. And leadership is important, and how governance works is very important. And to that end, the idea that there might be some changes isn't necessarily offensive. There's nothing about it that should cause anybody to be concerned. But the idea that Dr. Polzine and Fran Davin, people years with decades of experience on these issues, are just somehow going to be shuttled aside, and it will be a newly constituted group of leaders in anticipation of a tax proposal, it almost makes me wonder, given the tax proposal that's ostensibly coming to the table, would it make more sense? Would it bring more public buy-in if the HART board itself became an elected board? That as your leadership group talked about how to bring trust, because right now the optic just isn't good. It looks like the county commission and other interest groups are attempting to hijack the HART board. And I don't really have a stake because I'm a gubernatorial appointee, so it doesn't affect me as much as it does some of the folks that I genuinely believe have decades of experience, and relegating them to a citizens advisory board or some other sort of non-decision-making capacity, I think really doesn't reflect well on the direction of the policy group. To that, and I'm not really sure what more I wish to say other than just proceed carefully. Proceed carefully.
Thank you. Commissioner Merman?
Perfect comment, Director Bergen. Perfect comment. Proceed carefully. And that's what we're doing. I mean, we've taken 14 months to get to this. I guess you could say the cat got out of the bag, this concept, and I guess if the cat got out of the bag, the dog ran after it. But I think there is nothing on paper set in stone yet. And that's what I just asked this group today. Commissioner Davin, you started off perfectly. Let's just agree. And I'd like to really just make a motion to allow our chairman and our CEO to sit down with our attorney, the county attorney, David Smith, and try to work on an agreement or work on some compromise, collaborative language that they can bring back here that everybody can agree on that will build consensus. That's what I think the motion needs to be today. And that's what I'm going to set for. And I hope somebody will second that so we can really send the message. That's important. I mean, we have to start showing a great deal of leadership. And the message has got to be that we understand the whole big picture, the traffic problems, the transit problems in this community. And we're willing to step back and work on a consensus document. We shouldn't allow this to separate us. We don't want it to. Nobody wants it to feel like they've been taken over. But yes, the cat got out of the bag. There is nothing, there is not a consensus document yet. And there are some aspects of this plan that I'm not comfortable with. The details haven't been flushed out. So we have a long way to go. And let's do like what we're doing with the citizens of our community, is taking this out there and getting their feedback and building this to a point where we all can say this is going to be the best thing for Hillsborough County, the best thing for transportation. This has never been done before here in Hillsborough County. Actually, it's a consolidation. It's a very effective means to achieve our goal because all the different governments have come together. We have never had at the county, I mean, Commissioner Sharp will tell you, day one, what I wanted to have as a transportation czar. I needed somebody to tell me how we were planning for transportation at the county. Yes, we have public works people. We have people that build it and work it and do all that. Do we have people that really plan for it and get it done? No. We needed something different. Same with all the other local governments. So we had to, but this is such an opportunity for us. Get choice riders, more buses. Look at our ridership is starting to plateau out now. We need more ridership. This community is going to grow. We have to answer that need. And this, I mean, seize the day. This is it. This is where we have this positive influence to tell our citizens, yes, we agree, we're going to do it, we're going to get it right, and have better transportation in Hillsborough County.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Beckner, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I agree with, I think everybody has had some great contributions, and I think everybody here in their sense is right. The one thing for me that this has never been, it's never been about elected officials versus citizens. It's been about having the right collective mind share on this board. And what the policy leadership group, still we have not gotten to conversation yet. We talked about the elected officials being present on the board, but what I've also envisioned that's important for planning moving forward is having representatives from other agencies, and I mentioned that before. And so I don't know that I'm satisfied with the current discussions that we've had by just having it be comprised of all elected officials. I haven't heard about how the MPO would be represented, how FDOT would be represented, how all the different planning agencies would be represented on this board. And I think the citizens that sit on this board, I think currently they do provide a great contribution. And so I think we still have some work to do on what the composition of this board is going to look like. So I will just conclude by saying that I'm not satisfied that 13 is going to be the number on the board. I don't know what this would finally look like, and I'm not looking for a specific number. I'm looking for what this mind share will look like to make sure that as we move forward as a community and planning transportation, as I mentioned before, that we have the right people around this table, that we are not operating in our own individual silos, and that we can plan as a community and not just as one agency for transportation. So I'm not satisfied where we're at, and I think we do have a lot more of work to do, and certainly we should not let this one issue divide us as a board or as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Mr. Melendez.
Yeah, I'll take that as a compliment. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you everyone for your, I think it's all great input. Sentiments have been expressed so far that I would say that I would echo, and beginning with Director Jarosh, with Director Jarosh and Ms. Davin and Mr. Bowers. I think that I have concerns. I think, and it's kind of an interesting analogy, despite some popular belief, none of us arrived here in a horse and buggy today, but sometimes I think the cart can be put before the horse, and I think that just on its face, without considering the great amount of detail and all the work that's been done, and I definitely, applaud folks for the studies that have been done. I'm not a fan of putting the cart before the horse. I wasn't here during the 2010 referendum, but through being here as a board member, I got to see some of the ripple effects that as a board we kind of echoed through even today, and we're a lot of people had to work hard to fix, really, because people counted on something that didn't happen. So I would ask my fellow board members and the public that are listening right now, please don't allow prudence, stability, and what I would go ahead and call wisdom to be confused with stodginess or being stalwart. I think that we have been good stewards of the public trust. We've weathered just two notable storms together, 2 rounds of possible consolidation studies. And the beauty of this board is we've enjoyed some unanimity, but we've definitely been able to express our differing opinions, and we've maintained stability, and I think that's a great thing. I will say that we have a state charter, we have sovereignty, and the idea of upsetting that at this time would seem to me to reduce stability. So again, I don't oppose innovation. I think we've been leaders in innovation. We all know what they are. One bus away, the Regional Fare Box Initiative. We are not stodgy. We're not old wagon wheels here. I think we're a pretty good group. And I have seen, just by observation, and I could talk a lot about this, but I've seen a shift, and my sense is that there's a shift away from roadway widenings or improvements to a broader transportation picture, which I understand, and an idea of multimodal. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I've heard it said before, preservation before innovation. We've seen out in California recently the result of a 93-year-old water main break. I don't know if anyone saw that debacle, but I think that we have to, rushing to something that changes the way we function without balancing the needs of the community would be, I think, done in haste as far as this board's concerned. So one other observation, again, as a state representative, as a state-appointed representative, I'm a Hillsborough County representative, and what I hear, and this is just for your consideration, I hear more concern and questions from individual members of the public and more support for some of the plans and ideas that are being put forth. So from the public, I hear concern and questions, but from the leaders of some officials and special interest groups, I hear, let's do this thing now. And if we need to get, be really more proactive with talking to HOAs and really engaging people, I'm not seeing the support for this from individual people. I'm seeing a lot of it from experts and not to discount that. But I'm just saying, by observation, and my sense is that we still have a lot of listening to do with regards to the people that we serve. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Posey?
Thank you. Yeah, I've been quiet and listening here, partly to hear what my colleagues had to say, but partly because I was frankly expecting the discussion to really go in the direction of giving this board some clarity in terms of what the specifics of the governance proposal are. And we haven't got there. And in light of that, I'm very comfortable seconding Commissioner Merman's proposal. I think that there does need to be some work and some effort to flesh out those details and move ahead with that. I think there's a strong consensus by everybody at this table and perhaps everybody in the room that this community needs to invest more money in transportation and specifically public transportation. A lot of folks have been at that point for 1 or more decades and we've not been successful. The subsequent details is where we start to lose support. How much, how it's spent, and how it's governed. And as much as we share this aspiration, the details count. The details count on the projects, on the governance, on the how much, the whens, the whys, and to build the kind of coalition it's going to take to get support is going to mean details get worked out in all those areas. We often compare ourselves or want to compare ourselves to other areas and to improve our rankings, as it were. Well, this community isn't a particularly wealthy community. We're not going to buy our way to success. We need to be frankly smart. We need to spend the limited resources very effectively, and the attention frankly shouldn't be on governance. It should be on how we can get the most bang for the buck and have the most effective projects going forward so that we can in fact leverage our situation and make headway and remain and improve our overall competitiveness. I think that is the challenge. That doesn't mean all the details need to be worked out in advance, but it does mean you need a culture and an environment where we worry about not just constituency building, but cost effectiveness, and we need to be careful on that. As it relates to transportation governance, over the past few years in this community, we've had a host of initiatives looking at governance. A few years ago, we had T-BART. It was a top-down concept. It wasn't vetted in the community. It was never funded. We've had discussions with CCCs and TMAs. We've had a fair amount of energy spent on PSD HART consolidation and merger. We've gone through issues of merging the MPOs as part of the recertification process, and now we're talking about remaking this agency. And frankly, none of those efforts have anything to do with where we're at, in my opinion, in terms of transportation. We need to spend more money, and if we want better transportation. And yes, I do think governance is important, but it can't be looked at as the solution to the problem. It's part of it, and frankly, I would encourage folks to step back and look at a much broader review of the functional responsibilities of all of the agencies in the region, take the time, get the professional help, and do it correct and figure out what makes the most sense for governance, because right now we're kind of grasping at straws and pretending governance is the problem, where the problem is we need more resources and we need to spend it wisely. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Commissioner Vance?
Thank you. I guess what I would throw out there is, this governance keeps coming up. I would just encourage that the PLG do reconsider the idea of appointees. People with knowledge of Dr. Polzin and such obviously is a wealth of knowledge and very important to it. That said, I think I would just throw my support behind HART. I think HART is the group that needs to take the role in this. No, I don't think there's any one organization out there that has all the answers to mass transit, to the transportation needs, the roadways and such. But I think HART is probably the closest, and we can bring in the additional resources should this proposal pass in 2016, and I'm in favor of it.
Okay, thank you. Since everyone else has spoken, I haven't yet. There are a few things that we need to work through. I appreciate Commissioner Merman's suggestion about meeting with staff and meeting with our lawyer, with the county lawyer, because there are a lot of legal issues we still need to work out. I have always said, and I continue to say, that the county can change their members anytime they want. They are a signatory to HART's contractual body, but not, they can't change what the city of Temple Terrace or the city of Tampa does. That would have to be a charter change, and there's some other legal issues that would have to be worked out before we can go forward on that. And I don't think that the county has made a statement that that's what they want to do to begin with. I think that there's a lot of confusion in the press and a lot of confusion in the public as to what the essence of it is. There's a lot more hoops to jump through than just the county's going to take over HART, because that's not actually possible in the way that we're set up now. I will say this, I know that, and by the way, I want to applaud the county staff. They had put in there the Booz Allen report, which I sent them, which is, you talk about trying to butter the bread. Thank you very much for putting that in there on my suggestion. Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And, one of the things that it doesn't say in that particular study that there was included into it, it doesn't include some of the issues about road building and other things, and that may not even become any way part of HART's direction. But I accept the amendment, the motion that you have made. We do have a second on that. I'd like to clear the docket and the agenda. If there's not any other discussion about that, I would like to, Director Bergen.
No discussion, just a question. For clarity, the motion essentially authorizes the chair, yourself, and the CEO and attorneys to meet with their counterparts at the county.
Correct.
That does not authorize those three to make agreements or negotiate on behalf of the board, merely to do research and come to some sort of fact-finding mission and bring things back to this board. Is that correct? That
is my understanding. The motion, the maker of the motion, if you could clarify.
Fair enough.
Yes, it would be a fact-finding, but they would bring back a consensus agreement of what everybody would like to achieve. I don't want this to be just a fact-finding motion. I mean, we've got to start answering questions. I guess going back to my comments about sending that right message to the public that we're all working together. And I think, I just want us to reach consensus. And I think the best way to do it is to allow them to come together, pull the facts, and reach that consensus.
Fact-finding is important. Clearly, there's a lot of unanswered questions today. So if that helps to find truth or find fact, and they come back with recommendations, I'm fine with that. I'm just making sure that there's not an authorization being extended to quote unquote negotiate on behalf of this committee. Is that right?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was part of my question. I want to be clear that voting on this motion does not authorize the chairman and the CEO to bring a consensus back to us that we must accept.
Oh, I mean...
Well, if I may,
Well, answer that one for us.
if I may, I think that our attorney can answer that one, which is, consensus versus what the legal authority is, what we're able to do. I am not allowed to negotiate on behalf of HART. I mean, I'll be there to discuss what some of the options are, but it still would have to come before the board before any changes can be made, correct?
That's correct. It'll have to come back for the board, and the board will have to take action based upon the proposals that are presented to it.
Okay, thank you. Exactly. I think that, there is an overarching idea of what consensus actually means and what actually we can do to make that consensus work. We have a vote and a say as a board to go forward regardless of whatever that consensus may be. So I think that that's an important distinction to make. Commissioner Miller.
Mr. Chairman, would the maker of the motion please state again who would be sitting at the table to work on this?
Commissioner.
And I'm open to changes, but it would be the chairman,
Yes.
the CEO, our county attorney, David Smith, the HART attorney, and
That's what I was
the
gonna say.
county administrator, okay,
Yeah.
the county administrator.
Do you accept it?
Why, then we'd have to get into Bonnie White, our CFO, and, I don't think,
Just a question.
I don't think that's necessary. This is mostly legal and fine-tuning
Why
detail.
don't we leave it with those people you're identifying, and those people can consult with any staff people they need to consult with?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you accept the amendment to your particular motion?
Absolutely.
Okay. And I think maybe the CEO may want to not go there at some point after hearing all this discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner.
one of the things you're going to find out, I'm
Yes, sir.
particular for rules, was the amendment to add the county administrator? Yes. Okay, just want to make sure.
Okay.
There's a lot of muddle in there, just want to make sure.
And the second of that motion, Mr. Posey, you accept that too? Okay, terrific. If you could, Commissioner.
Is to bring back a consensus document that that has all the details laid out to it so that everybody understands and can support moving forward. On governance, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Lena, you got all that? Okay, so we know we're going forward. Mr. Melendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if this document is brought back with consensus, there would be, it would be articulated as to what there's consensus on. There would be detail, and it would be from their body, not from our body being there.
Correct.
Acknowledging consensus or stating, because I just want to clarify, if someone votes for this motion, it is not an expression of preliminary approval or consensus with regards to a change.
If I could, Commissioner, before you go forward, there are so many legal issues that need to be worked out that would probably be best, that the two attorneys are able to talk about it. That's, I think, the essence of your motion.
It
Is that
is,
correct, Commissioner?
exactly. It really
Because
is.
there are so many things that need to be worked out because we are a statutorily appointed committee, board, that, you can't just simply, let's go forward and do this. There are so many other things that we need to do before anything happens that this is probably the best preliminary way of going forward.
Thank you.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments about that particular motion? All right, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much, I appreciate it. Mr. Smith, you do have a report to give to us, our legal report, and I was going to go to the CEO, but I'm going to go to you first because we've been talking legalities here, so you might as well go ahead and go
I
forward.
actually had a report that dealt with a lot of the parameters, constraints, and solutions to the constraints of what we were just talking about. It seems more prudent now to just wait till we have our meeting and come back with something a little more definitive for this board to review.
And thank you, Mr. Smith. You're you're a very wise man. CEO, your interim CEO report, please.
Thank you, Councilman. Just a few issues that you will see in the upcoming weeklies. We have a lot that we'll be wrapping up in August. First is we have entered a pilot program with HCC, Hillsborough County Community College. The community college students purchase monthly passes at the bookstores. We are partnering with all the campuses, or is that campi? They could tell us, they're the students. We are partnering with them to offer a semester-long pass. This will be a new fair media. We're going to see how the sales go. Currently, students buy monthly passes, the 31-day passes for $47.50. This would be a discounted fare mechanism for the entire semester at $110. HCC does not have the ability, like USF, to enter into an agreement where the student fees are paying for transportation, so students pay all of this out of pocket. So this is our first attempt to engage a non-USF, one of our local schools, and see what kind of student interest there is. We're excited about this. We'll be doing marketing on campus, and we'll be coming back to the board with information on utility and future steps. So just one thing to brag about. We've also started our discussions with Amazon. Ruthie Reyes-Burkhart and Steve Feigenbaum. If Steve is still here, he may have gone back. Thank you, Steve. We had a great conversation last week with Amazon. The existing, it was great to hear people in Seattle say, wow, we do like the maps that you have out there. So yay. They said your weekend service you need to work on. So we'll be coming back to you with information, and we think that we can do some pilot programs here with Amazon on the commuter passes and employer pass side. So we're very excited about those opportunities. We've also made some service modifications around Leto High School to start seeing what kind of utility we get from a charter school if it's easier for those kids to go back and forth.
Did you say Leto?
Leto.
Leto. I was wondering what school that was,
I've been so
but thank
outed
you.
as a non-Tampa native.
Someone
I'm
who
so
is
sorry.
non-Tampa native, exactly.
That's like I have to go have a guava cheese turnover to make up for this. And then this month, we're also rolling out text messaging for One Bus Away. We'll be coming to you in September with a review of our onboard survey. About half our passengers said they had smartphones. Anywhere from 35 to 40% said they had cell phones. Full disclosure, many were holding their smartphone telling the survey taker, I have a phone, and they weren't flagging it as a smartphone. But the text messages will give us the ability to push out the next vehicle arrival information to folks who don't have the smartphones. We'll have more details on that as that comes up. We're very excited. And also this month, potentially as early as this week, we will post an RFP for Wi-Fi that the agency does not pay for. There are a lot of models nationwide in New Jersey, Arizona, Connecticut, where a third-party vendor comes in to provide the Wi-Fi completely separate from the systems of the transit agency. They pay for it from advertising, and some additional revenue comes back to the entity. So as much as I like saving money and I like free, I like getting money from people better. So we've had a lot of interest in the RFI process, and we hope to have that up and running on our system this year. So those are things you will see in the weekly. We just wanted to brag preemptively. Then the presentation, the slides in front of you, are for service options. We've come to you with our TDP status quo plan and also our vision plan. And one point we discussed back in June was that the TDP vision plan doubles the amount of transit, but it essentially keeps the footprint of service the same in the county. We have things which are not in the TDP that if we're not discussing in the context of this countywide program, we will be remiss. For instance, the TDP vision plan does not include any park and rides. And clearly, if we're going to go out and get more service in the county, we need to be talking about park and rides. So just wanted to walk through what is in your status quo plan in some easy to follow, hopefully easy to follow slides, what's in the vision plan as adopted, and what are additional items that HART would like to forward to the county for their consideration. Again, this isn't anything that's included in a plan which you've adopted, so we're asking for your feedback today, but not for the board to take a vote. It wouldn't be appropriate to ask you to authorize including this formally until we get this rolled into a robust TDP. So status quo plan, we'd like to stress this is a funding status quo plan. It presumes ad valorem is about the same. Federal and state grants are about the same. Fare box recovery keeps between 20 and 22%. The status quo plan most notably includes no additional buses, which means no possibility for additional rush hour service. It's deploying as much as we can midday and as much as we can on the weekends. It increases frequency on service, but again, we're very constrained in what we can do looking at the rush hour footprint, and that's where folks are asking for service. Organically, in the next 10 years, we assume our revenue streams would go up about $9 million, but again, this is status quo on our funding. So the slides just detail what is included in that plan. Any questions on that before I scroll ahead? And this is, again, the adopted status quo plan. The adopted vision plan is really a service footprint status quo. And by that I mean we currently have 67% of the jobs and 41% of the residents in Hillsborough County within a 5-minute walk. That's a quarter mile of a bus route. And with the vision plan, the deployment of additional service, we still will have 41% of the residences, but 66% of the jobs in 2025. And this is just driven by the fact that we are growing as a county. And even putting additional service out there will keep up with the growth, but does not expand what the footprint is for the agency. The vision plan assumes an additional bus garage and an additional van garage. These are requirements, again, for expanding service. We are excited about these opportunities. If we can get a new garage, it lets us get closer to South County for some of our trips and cut back on our deadhead. Again, our express routes, 2% of our ridership and 40% of deadhead. That's times we're running just to get those buses positioned, and it'd be great if we could shorten that up. This does not include, the prices we've given you don't include the additional van growth required to meet the service demand. That's something we would bring back as the budget cycles evolve. This includes all the Metro Rapid corridors that we have talked about. This does include additional neighborhood circulators and some express routes. Express routes going to a broader schedule, but not extremely broad. The end result of the status quo plan is an operating budget that is not the 65 million-ish you see now. It's about 117 million for this price tag. So the status quo plan takes us up about $40-odd million at the end of a 10-year window. And again, this does not include park and rides. This does not include technology investments, which we would like to be able to get in front of and be able to afford to handle these appropriately. This does not include anything for public-private partnership, and those are the issues that we would like you to discuss us including as we talk to the county. Now, we've talked about the beyond this vision plan, the HART plan, I believe it was referred to. We talk about this as going beyond the bus, because we're not just talking about bus improvements. We are here talking about the technology for the mobile ticketing. Imagine an application where the mobile ticket is your proof for guaranteed ride home if you caught an express, and you can use an app going through your ticket to book your trip to go home, so you've got that resource right there. So there are a lot of technology improvements that we think are critical to make our system more usable as we expand it. There's also the public-private partnerships that we currently don't have budgeted as an opportunity in the vision plan. And if you look at our first bullet, we say this assumes 100% potential coverage of Hillsborough County. Now, we know this is an exhaustive goal, but we believe if we partner with our friends at Metro B and other smaller providers, that we can come up with a system that anybody who wants to get into the network has a service that will get them there. This simply is not included in our vision plan. There's some summary of changes. All our express routes, for instance, under this idea, would go for a 15-minute window for 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon. It adds park and ride lots. We don't have any planned in the vision plan, and again, without that, there is no placeholder in this big county program to talk about park and rides. It talks about additional flex routes, one more bus garage. And again, rideshare partnerships, and all our Metro Rapids will go to 10-minute frequency. Now, we would like to stress this does not include full BRT being like the Cleveland model, the dedicated guideway. The county has included this in their long range, their big program. We did not want to include it in the HART document and also in the county document and inflate the cost of operation. So that is not something that we're asking to take forward for consideration with the county, but we are asking for you to discuss us saying, hey, we want to be a little more robust in a vision plan if we're going out around the county, getting feedback, listening to what folks want to do. And again, not to beat a dead horse, but if we're not talking park and rides, we are clearly not providing relevant and attractive options for folks to discuss. So the request from a board member was to provide these slides to say, here's what we'd like to take to the county. We can answer any questions, and unless we are directed not to, we will continue working with the county on this type of footprint for service.
Okay. Any questions about the alternative for TDP? Yes, ma'am.
Well, it relates to it in a roundabout way. I'm concerned that before we get any deeper into discussion of projects, whether on the project list that was brought up here or on other project lists, that we at least go back and review the AA, because although it was never finalized, there was a great deal of money and time and expertise put into that AA. And Commissioner Hart, you'll Sharp, you'll remember that we spent a great deal of time looking at routes for possible light rail. And I was troubled to see in the newspaper counting the other day, and it may not even be correct, okay? But I was troubled to see that they were talking about Cypress. And if you remember, as we did all that detailed work on the AA, for a lot of technical reasons, Cypress was not recommended as a route. I think before we go any further with a list of projects that we're going to vet for the public, that they at least need to be run through the filter of all the work that was done on the AA. You'll remember that, because when we sat here and had so much, I don't think anyone else was on the, well, yeah, you were.
Director Posey, you have a comment?
But we discarded some projects for technical reasons, and I would hope before we go any further with any lists, we would go back and match them against the study work that was done then.
Okay, Dr. Posey.
Yeah, just a general comment, and this certainly applies to a lot of the transit plan. I mean, we're an agency that our vision plan doubled transit service over 10 years. And in case anybody hasn't been watching, the world's been changing pretty darn fast out there with economics and demographics and technology, et cetera. And our vision plan looked at a doubling, and the referendum alternatives look at anywhere from a tripling to quintupling, depending on how much and when and whether ad valorem rollbacks, et cetera. The idea that we can make prudent decisions today on spending 3 or 4 times as much as we're currently spending on transit, and ignoring the market feedback and the changes in the economy and everything else that's going to happen as we start to roll out service is a challenge, because obviously the public looks for specificity and commitment, but prudent planning would say we're going to expand service, we know we need to expand it, and then we do what we do all the time. Every quarter we look and monitor and look at feedback and change and adjust. And similarly with the capital projects, we'd get impact assessments and environmental impacts and community input and et cetera. So the challenge, I think, will continue to be how much specificity and what nature of commitment goes with a concept plan that's you know, and multiple times today's service a decade or more into the future. And I think that needs some discussion by the policy leadership group. Otherwise, you'll be tripping over yourselves about who promised what and when, relative to being pragmatic and responding to market forces and et cetera, as they mature over time. So I'm just throwing that out as an issue, because if anybody thinks it's a good idea to specify what we're going to do in 20 years to frequency specific, it's not. And so we just need to be careful. Yes, we need to spend a bunch more. There's a lot of good things to do. How much specificity we can lock in, I think, is a challenge that policy leadership group has.
Okay. All right. Any other comments about that? I have one other housekeeping that Mr. Smith brought up. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, I thought this would be brought up by the ad hoc committee, but since it was my recommendation that they approved, I'll speak to it. The ad hoc committee voted to throw out the existing, not yet awarded legal procurement. The alternative would be to go to an RFQ approach, which is what several other agencies in our area do. You basically do a request for qualifications, and you get 2 or 3 or whatever reasonable amount of law firms that are qualified to do your work. The reason that's advantageous is it gives you alternatives in the event of a conflict. It also gives you the ability to move the work if the work is unsatisfactory from one firm that you've chosen. It also allows you to respond in the event that firm changes its components, and you may be working with one particular person who's no longer there. And so you have the ability to get someone else who can step in, and also it avoids a situation we had recently where the only approved counsel filed bankruptcy, and it leaves us with nobody. So that's not a situation I'd recommend we be in. I don't think local procurement should be done just like you acquire widgets and pairs. I think you need to do it on a qualification basis.
Okay. Any questions on that particular issue? Okay, one last thing we have before we go. We have public comment.
Mr. Chairman,
Sir,
before you
I
move on,
apologize.
I would like to get a motion directing us to
Oh, I
move forward
apologize.
with.
Can we entertain a motion for that? Moved and second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Smith. I appreciate it. We have public comment now at the end of our meeting. Mr. Joe Hanlon is here to speak. Sir, if you could, come before us and speak.
Okay, I'm a concerned citizen seeking better transportation options. My comment aims to develop a consensus on big improvements to mass transit. What is the most controversial, divisive obstacle to such consensus? I think this focus raises several questions this board could consider in the future to build public trust and confidence. Mainly, the question boils down to funding these big improvements to mass transit. Big costs for capital expenses to build it, big costs for operating expenses to run it and maintain it. One of the critical issues is going to be, what is the source of this funding? How much of it will be public funding, and how much of it will be devoted to ridership and user-generated revenues? I think if this board focuses on some of those key questions, many concerned taxpayers and other users will begin to understand where you're going and can either line up as advocates or opponents, but you'll begin to winnow through some of those important questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other members of the public that wish to speak at this time? I don't see anyone. If there is no old or new business before us, I say we're adjourned. Thank you all.